Hi, welcome to Blogging His TV and Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade. And my guest today, back again, Daniel Bessner. Daniel, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Daniel Bessner. I teach the history of U.S. foreign relations and intellectual history of 20th century America at the University of Washington.
Thanks for coming back on. So we taped an episode, I think it was a week ago Friday, and it posted last week about Jeffrey Epstein. And since that episode aired, Jeffrey Epstein is no longer living. He has killed himself, seemingly, or did he? Right. So we thought we would return to this subject in a brief kind of addendum and give our thoughts about this wild turn of events. So what did you, I mean, when you first saw that breaking news headline, what did you think?
This is honestly one of the wackiest news stories of my lifetime. I cannot believe that this has happened. It's funny, if you ever watch the show Peep Show, one of the characters goes, I haven't really been happy because there's been no good news lately. And he doesn't mean like good news, but he means, good news. And so this is like really good news in that sense, in that it's going to drive so much commentary and so much discussion. And also I think it's going to, I can't imagine if you're 18 and you're just becoming online politically and you see this, how you cannot view the system as anything but fundamentally corrupt. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of the generational effects this has. I have a feeling that'll, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic here, but it seems like it has to be a defining political moment for a generation of people in their teens and their 20s, seeing the sort of incredible corruption, sort of the most venal thing that is possible in this particular culture at this particular moment, pedophilia. And it's actually interesting in the comments, people dinged me for saying pedophilia instead of ephebophilia.
Yeah, that's one of the great all-time, running internet pedant things is the difference between pedophilia and ephebophilia. Ephebophiles, I think, are attracted to post-pubescent.
And I'm not sure guarantee that Epstein restricted his rapaciousness to post-pubescent girls, but my guess is he did not. But yes, sure. So I'm just using pedophile in the common sense way it is used in this country, which is for basically statutory rape. So I just want to emphasize that. But so basically the most venal thing that people are culturally told from the day they were born, which is pedophilia / ephebophilia, was done. And then the guy who is basically set to blow up at the very least rich people's spots and probably very powerful politicians' spots. And I believe one unnamed prime minister was also involved in sort of the Lolita Express, as it's called. And then the fact that he not only something happened about a month ago, he tried and failed to kill himself, or someone tried and failed to murder him, but then he appears to be having been taken off suicide watch and then killed himself. So it's such a moment of corruption from so many different angles. I can't imagine that this won't be a politically important moment that reveals the rot at the core of the system as it currently exists. And also, I'll end on this, and also the fact that it's wrapped up in mass incarceration, and sort of the awful prison system, the unjust prison system that we have as well, which is, I think, a tangential story. I think that right after news came that he died or was killed himself or was murdered or whatever it may be, we might never know, and that there were some people online who were arguing that to focus on the corruption misses the point of the cruelty of the prison system, and I think that's a bit misguided. But I do think it does highlight, as a tangential matter, the cruelty of the prison system as such. So I'm just wondering when you're going to sign up for DSA and when you're going to declare your allegiance to the Communist Party, because clearly this system. It's like late Imperial Tsarist Russia, this stuff that's happening. It's like a Rasputin was killed.
We think Epstein is down for the count for good, unlike Rasputin, who came back a couple times.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, when I first saw the headline, when I woke up on Saturday, initially it was, holy shit, oh my God, I can't believe this. And then very quickly, I looked on Twitter and everyone was just in shock. But then, like, very quickly, 5-10 minutes maybe, people were making jokes. And,
Right.
And memes were coming, and there were jokes about, the Clintons actually did do it. And, all these kind of things were previewed when the first mysterious incident happened. And then it kind of became, at least online, just kind of another rollicking, good old time for people cracking jokes and getting retweets. And, there was, if people aren't on Twitter, they missed this weird phenomenon about the 30 to 50 hogs.
Right.
That was a silly meme that went viral for about 24 hours. And I felt like this was just a continuation of that spirit where it was just like, people were making dark jokes and silly jokes and all sort of things. And I thought that the fact, so I think this event could be probably compared to Jack Ruby killing Oswald.
Yes.
In terms of seeming errors of police procedure, and also we're not going to know the real truth now. I don't think when Ruby shot Oswald, people were cracking jokes 15 minutes later. That scene is in Mad Men, and you see everyone they watch it live, and they're horrified that someone was just murdered before their eyes on television. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's how it was portrayed there. And so I think that this fact that just the we've kind of all accepted that everything is grist for the mill, and that absurd things are continually happening. There was shock. I don't know who couldn't have been legitimately shocked when they heard this, but very quickly we're like, okay, how can I turn this into some content for myself? And I joined in alongside. I'm sure cracking. I've cracked some Epstein joke myself. I wrote an essay on Medium about 2 years ago that was called, I think, The Incredible Lightness of Donald. That was about how I felt a weird sort of psychic peace with the fact that an absurd person like Donald Trump was the most powerful person in the country, and his absurdity almost made it seem like, nothing really mattered. And I felt a sense of peace with that. I don't know if I had to reread it and see if I still agree with this 2 years later, now that additional horrors have happened under.
We talked about that essay, actually.
Under Trump's rule, yeah. But I think this kind of fits into a, LOL, nothing matters, mood that the country is in. It does seem kind of like a late Roman Empire, what's the word that Ross Douthat uses all the time? Not degeneracy, but this is like the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and we just giggle as the situation burns. So there's that. So I'd like you to react to that if you have any reactions to that. And then there's the murder or suicide.
Let's take one first, because there's a lot there, I think, and then we'll go to the murder. Okay, so I think I believe Mark Harris, right? Hypernormalization. I think this is just another example of hypernormalization, where things that were previously absurd are considered to just be normal now. And this is the whole thing. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. So I think this is just one of the most salient examples of that, even since Trump's election. And Trump's election is probably the apotheosis of that sort of phenomenon, where literally the plot of Idiocracy becomes true, where a reality TV star who doesn't even have the sort of surface level nonsense credentials of the other people, the other venal people like Bill Clinton, who became president, is elected president. So I think it's an element of that. And with regards to the humor, I think that's interesting, because I think that the Ruby example is instructive in a couple of ways. Ruby example is that more of a monoculture, right? So that we don't live in a monoculture anymore. And so there's no general reaction to Epstein's death. And in fact, the reaction that people like you and I and people listening to this who are plugged into the media sphere is going to be filtered through Twitter. So Twitter is a public sphere. I don't think it doesn't matter. I think that's misguided when people say Twitter is not the real world, but I think it's just a particular world in a series of worlds. So who's on Twitter? It's basically the information elite of the country, the information elite, the cultural producers, and people who are interested in that sphere. It's not even as much so anymore for celebrities. Do you remember when Twitter first came out? It was like Katy Perry and Ashton Kutcher. And I think there's still that element, but I think there's less of that. And there's a variety of different Twitter worlds, and the world that we're interested in is sort of this cultural world. So the response to Epstein is also the response to people who dedicate their lives to thinking about these issues. And then if we're thinking about these people of a very particular community and a very particular historical moment, I think we have to talk about the political function of humor. And there's actually been some interesting writing on the political function of humor, and particularly what humor does. Particularly writing in humor in authoritarian regimes, and I don't think we live in an authoritarian regime, and we can talk about that later. But what it does in feelings of helplessness is that it essentially serves as an escape valve, right? So that what you're doing by cracking jokes about Epstein is that you're essentially saying that you get it. You know, that the elite who's trying to manipulate you is not able to manipulate you, because you're not going to take this as anything for what it is, as anything else than for what it is, which is a fact of total elite manipulation. And I think that's the political function of humor, right? It's essentially giving a fuck you to the elite that people are perceiving as trying to manipulate them. So it's not so much in the humor. It's not like Seinfeld, right, where Seinfeld was trying to be funny for funny's sake. This humor has a political function. It's basically a demystifying function, as I see it. You're trying to demystify the fact that this incredibly mystifying thing happened, and no one's going to probably suffer the consequences of it. So there's a political purpose to the humor. So but
there's also a clout-seeking purpose to the humor, and that we're doing it within the system that gets likes and retweets, and if maybe you'll get some new followers. So it's not that you're not just like in a text message thread with your friends cracking jokes. You're also in the back of your head thinking, oh, maybe this one will go viral, and then who knows what happens if your joke goes viral, but everyone wants to do it anyway.
Right, that's the public sphere aspect of it, and so the public sphere, it's a public thing. So it's the political function of public humor, right? And in the past, you would have maybe gotten cheers because this was only possible in the town square or whatever it may be. Now you're getting likes and retweets and things along those lines. So it's cloud building, but it's always been cloud building. Anything other than private conversation. I mean, if you look at Cicero, all those speeches were delivered in the forum, right? It's always a form of cloud building, and I think I agree that the particular form or the particular medium of the message is very important, but the message is also important within the medium, and we can't lose sight of that. And I think it's a very old tradition of political humor in the face of first radical uncertainty, and then second feelings of powerlessness. I think the Epstein thing really shows that you felt powerless, or people feel powerless. Where the Ruby thing, people were aghast because this guy seemed to have subverted American institutions. No one believes in institutions anymore.
Right.
That's what this demonstrates. No one believes that this will result in anything. So it's a profound reflection of decline or imperial decline. Now, the problem is, we can't get into this now, unlike the Roman Empire, the United States could still annihilate the world with nuclear bombs. So you could have cultural decadence, and with the Roman military.
Decadence is the word I was searching for earlier that Ross Douthat likes to use about our cultural era.
Yeah, but the problem is you were going to have cultural decadence with total military dominance, which has never before happened in world history. So that's a pretty messed up situation.
Okay, so in addition to everyone cracking jokes in the 5 minutes, the other thing that surprised me in the reaction to aftermath of Epstein's death was how many people, including responsible prominent people, were speculating conspiracy theory. Now, it's like we live in an era of conspiracy theories. Some of them true, some of them false. And there's actually Douthat himself has a good column today about why we shouldn't dismiss conspiracy theories, and they often contain an element of truth. There was a conspiracy theory 25 years ago about the Catholic Church and a powerful cabal of priests protecting abusers, and that turned out to be basically true. On the other hand, my basic view of most conspiracy theories is it's a lot more likely to be incompetence that caused a disaster or something than a well orchestrated insider plan. And so the most likely thing to me seems to be like, okay, this prison is poorly run, even though I guess it's one of the most important prisons in the country, the federal lockup in Manhattan. And it wouldn't surprise me if whoever was assigned to guard Epstein in the midnight to 8 a.m. shift fell asleep. or something along those lines. So that seems more likely to me than the assassin understanding. But yeah, I've just seen lots of, I think Iglesias was one of them. I think possibly Nate Silver was one of them. Just not, saying like, this could have been a hit. This could have been a murder. So, I mean, well, what do you think of that? And also, are you entertaining conspiracy theories, or are you buying the accepted narrative right now?
I don't think this requires conspiratorial thinking. I think people are murdered and raped in prison all the time. And so it wouldn't be surprising that another person was murdered in prison. I don't think that's particularly conspiratorial. The Kennedy assassination thing is conspiratorial because it requires transnational organization amongst various elements of whether it's the CIA or the Department of Defense or the Cuban government or the local Dallas gangsters. That's conspiratorial. Mm-hmm. This to me isn't conspiratorial. People are murdered and assassinated in prisons literally all the time. So I don't think it actually requires that much of a conspiracy thinking. The conspiracy is the Lolita Express more than anything else, and that's the conspiracy to conspire to rape young women. I think that is a conspiratorial element, and that has been proven true. The murder, to me, doesn't be the supposed murder, to me, doesn't seem to be that conspiratorial, or the fact that someone paid off a guard to allow Epstein to kill himself or whatever it may be. I mean, I would be absolutely shocked if there wasn't some sort of foul play, however that may be defined, whether it's bribing a guard to go away for 8 hours or whether it's paying someone to go in and murder Epstein and make sure the job is done. I don't see how that doesn't seem to be particularly conspiratorial given what we know about what happens in American prisons.
Well, I mean, if some outside person or organization pays someone who's already in there to either kill Epstein or turn their back as he, kills himself or whatever, then that seems like a conspiracy to me. If it doesn't take that many people to make a conspiracy, maybe it's just 3 or something.
But that happens in prison, right? Gangs constantly pay people to be killed in prison.
Right, but was this
is that a conspiracy? I mean, I don't think that. Not really.
Well, I guess it comes down to semantics of people organizing as a group. I mean, if I think as we mentioned in the previous episode, you mentioned pedophiles or accused pedophiles are often targeted for harsh treatment in jail by other inmates. But Epstein was segregated and was seemingly had a cell to himself. I mean. What I said, I re-listened to the part where we discussed this last night. What I said was like, they should be treating him like a mafia king in prison, not like a common criminal. And they didn't take my advice because I assume like John Gotti wasn't allowed to, be unsupervised for some length of time when he was awaiting trial. Do you think we're going to find out the truth of what happened, or do you think this is going to be another great American mystery?
It's so difficult to know. It would rely on some sort of leak. So someone's got a leak. I mean, the Epstein thing is just so crazy when you read into it, like all the connections between these various spheres of life. I don't think we'll find something out, but I also didn't think Trump was going to be elected president. So what do I know? I mean, I think we do live in these hyper-normalized times. I think that is the defining characteristic of this era. And I think clearly something is crumbling. I think it's the famous, is it Marx or Gramsci? I think it's Marx. The new world is collapsing the old world is collapsing as the new one struggles to be born, right? I think that's the moment we live in, which is, I think, particularly jarring for people of our generation who grew up in the 90s when we were told history had ended. So we went from like this one moment of history had ended to like everything is collapsing. So I think that's going to be an interesting, as a historian, I think looking back on that as we get older and approach death, it'll be interesting to look to look back and see how that sort of really radical 180-degree turn, right? We went from the end of history to Trump. That's got to do something to the politics of a generation. I think in a way much more significant than the baby boom generation, which had the longest period of stability in American history. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that also going forward. To me, that's what's most compelling is the sort of medium to long-term political ramifications of the obvious corruption of this system on people who are basically under 40 who will soon be seizing the reins of state once the boomers die and retire. That to me is really interesting. I think this is going to be a defining political moment for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, In a way, this does seem like a huge moment, and on the other hand, we live in this era in which every 72 hours there's a world-defining moment, and if we listed every single one from the past 2.5 years, we'd be like, oh, I didn't even remember that one happened.
I've never said that. I've never said. I think there's been a lot of overplaying that hand, and I think that liberals are freaked out about Trump and they want to turn everything into something that it's not. And so I think that I'm down here recording. So I think that's sorry.
That's okay.
So I'm in the pit. So I think that there's been a lot of overplaying of sort of like, this is so egregious. I think a lot of the things were laid by Obama. I think Trump has been mostly the same in a lot of regards, with sort of more vulgarity and more cruelty. Not in every regard. He's been worse in some significant ways. But I think this sort of node of Epstein and this total corruption that surrounds him and the total absurdity of him trying to kill himself last month and then being murdered right now, and the whole
possibly being murdered or possibly just committing suicide. It is hard to fake a hanging, as far as I understand, and like the medical examiner, will release something about, well, like, I think you could tell the difference between, if like hands strangled someone or if bedsheet or something.
I mean, look at Acosta. I mean, like, the whole thing is wrapped in this sort of powerful people leaning on the justice system to get what they want. If you remember what Acosta, this is what's going to fuel conspiracy theories. Acosta reported to the Trump transition team that he was told to leave Epstein alone because he was involved with intelligence, right? And I think the Chapo guys were talking about this. I don't think it's absurd to say that perhaps money was was laundered through Epstein's hedge funds. I mean, to me, that the U.S. government has done things like that repeatedly in the past, going back 100 years. So it wouldn't be shocking, and it would, in fact, have quite a bit of historical precedent to do things like that. And so I think this is where Epstein was really tied into all of these various elements of the state, and corporations and transnational money laundering, and then pedophilia/ephebophilia. So I think the perfect storm, and then he's murdered or allegedly murdered or commits suicide in prison. It's of a different qualitative character than basically everything that's happened since Trump has been elected.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we'll have to see. We'll wait 2 months and see what happens, because there's going to be a new outrage because it's Trump. Something new is going to happen. And we'll have to see if this fades or not. So there was a piece that did you see the piece that was in the Times yesterday by a guy who had interviewed Epstein on Background?
Yeah.
So that was an interesting piece. We'll link to it. And there's no like huge juicy nuggets or anything, but there are a couple of interesting things. One was there was a photo of Mohammed bin Salman on Epstein's wall, MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and another. What's that?
Tom Friedman's buddy.
Right, friend to all, friend to the Free Press. And another interesting thing was that Epstein asked this reporter for the Times if he might want to collaborate with him to write Epstein's memoir. And can you imagine if you were guilty of like somewhere between hundreds and thousands of crimes, and then asking a New York Times reporter to co-write your memoir? Like, what? That's just, like, I don't even know what to say about that. It's totally fucking insane.
Have you watching Succession?
I watched the first season. I haven't seen the
yeah. So it's Succession. We live in the world of Succession. Like, literally, this is what's happening. Like, the rich and powerful are just doing what they want, and we're all clucking in the background. It's late, or it might not even be late. It's just imperial. It's just imperial. Maybe it's 1788, but maybe it's 1640. Mm-hmm. Like, who knows? Maybe there's quite a bit left of this. I don't know. We live in really bizarre times, especially, to me, what's so interesting is how quickly we live in bizarre times. That's the most interesting thing to me. The 90s was not bizarre. There were some dark undercurrents of American life coming to the fore in places like Waco, Ruby Ridge, the Oklahoma City bombings, things like that. But what is happening now is I just think of a different scale, and of a higher, more powerful scale, frankly. It's very interesting.
Yeah. And the other little interesting tidbit in this article was that Epstein invited the journalist to come have dinner at his house, and he said Steve Bannon and Michael Wolff, who would go on to write Fire and Fury, would be there. And the office says he has no idea to know if this event ever would have actually happened or not. But there's a lot of connections to Trump still to come out from this. And the joke on the right was that the Clintons killed Epstein, and then I can't really imagine like the Trump organization being like effective enough to organize a murder of Epstein like this. And really, I mean, the Clintons weren't super effective either. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of shit, like, okay, Ghislaine, or however you say her first name, Maxwell, is still out there. Apparently no one knows where she is or will say they know where she is. And she seems like she knows everything that Epstein knew. Like, she was really the major domo and procurer of girls. So she seems like she has to be charged in the wake of this, and hopefully will be better protected in prison than Epstein was. Maybe if they won't make that mistake again.
So Aryeh, so you really just think a guard fell asleep? To me, if we're doing what's the thing, the Occam's razor, mm-hmm. It is not the guard falling asleep.
Well, okay, I think it's more likely that the guard would be paid to clock out for a couple hours.
Yeah.
That seems possible to me. But then, then did the guard leave in order for Epstein to be permitted to kill himself? Or
sure, maybe. I mean,
that seems within the realm of possibility. But then opening the door to his cell and someone else comes in, kills him, no one else notices, the guy leaves again. Is this guy a prisoner? Is he a guard?
Goering, right? You know Hermann Goering, how he died.
I don't actually.
So Hermann Goering was the third Nazi in charge, was convicted, was set to hang on October 16th, my birthday, after being convicted in the Nuremberg trials, and then he killed himself because a guard slipped him poison. Uh-huh. So I think, and that was at the end of World War II in a military prison. Huh. So these things happen actually regularly throughout history. So that is not shocking to me. I think if the deep history of these things happen repeatedly, things like that. And so I would, if someone put a gun to my head and said foul play or not, I would say foul play, and I would save him that bet.
Yeah, I think I would say not foul play. Again, it's not worth getting into now. There was something in the deep history of blogging heads where people on the outside thought there was this conspiracy going on. I was on the inside, and I just saw that it was a series of understandable screw-ups by various people not doing the correct thing. From the outside, it looked, like a hidden hand was dictating events. From the inside, it was just oh yeah, he fucked up there, then I fucked up here, then that person fucked up there. I think that is a lot more likely given human nature than the well-organized conspiracy.
Yes, I think 99 out of 100 times it is not a conspiracy. I don't think this is conspiratorial, what I'm saying. But I think this might be the one time where there is a cabal of powerful people manipulating the world to their own rapacious ends. That also happens throughout history, repeatedly.
Yeah, sometimes. Okay.
It's so absurd. This is a postmodern crime. I mean, this is as postmodern as it gets. The subtext is text. Again, I was listening to the Chapo the other day, the one that was right after Epstein tried to kill himself, and they're like, this is crazy. And then 2 weeks later, he succeeds in killing himself, or a month later, whatever it is. I mean, we're laughing because it's so obviously corrupt.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this on the show before, but there's the well-known quote about history, history repeating twice, first as tragedy, then as farce. We're in the farce period for sure. And I think that's part of why everything kind of seems absurd and a joke. I mean, is there a more farcical figure on earth than Donald J. Trump? I don't know. Okay, we wanted to keep this one short. Let's keep this under half an hour. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, just read Marx. I think that was in his Louis Napoleon.
The Brumaire, the Brumaire of the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon.
Louis Napoleon, yeah. And the first Napoleon was a tragedy, and the second one was the farce.
Right.
I think that pretty much wraps up where we are now. A good place to end.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Thank you to our viewers and listeners. Will there be another edition of the Epstein Chronicles with Daniel and Aryeh? We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens to Ghislaine.
Yeah, God protect her. Okay. Do you know what? Okay, last thing. Do you know what happened to her father? I only found this out like yesterday. Her father died.
No, what happened?
Her father died in mysterious circumstances. He fell off a yacht.
Like in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Exactly. It all comes full circle.
Exactly. Yeah, and it was. There's still questions about whether he was killed or accident or suicide or what. Okay, so on that happy note, thanks again, Daniel. Thanks to our viewers and listeners. We'll see you again next time.
Bye.